So today we're talking about wellness in the workplace, but also wellness in your career. Doesn't necessarily have to just be in the organization, but we'll also talk about what does your wellness look like outside of the workspace, and then how does it impact how you show up at work every day. So starting with how organizations can really prioritize employee well-being, I was actually reading this article from Gallup. And in that article, it said women who report feeling stressed a lot of the day are 46% more likely to be actively looking for or wanting a new job. And so this really stood out to me because to me, that says, hey, organizations, if you don't prioritize your employees' well being, it's directly impacting your retention, right? Employee retention. So I wanted to have this conversation
Absolutely.
and ask you, because Merary, I know you understand this very well working in HR. This is a hard conversation for a lot of employees to have. So, what do you think about this? How do you think employees can address this conversation in the workplace?
Absolutely. Well, I think it goes both ways, right? It
Hmm.
is the responsibility of the employer, but also the responsibility of the employee. Because one thing that I found is that specifically, whether you want to call it work life balance, work life integration, or
Yeah.
no matter what it is that is kind of holding you back from achieving your best, is something that we must continue to evaluate. The same way organizations got to continue to evaluate the services and the benefits that they provide to the employees as a specifically for me as a
Hmm.
woman, as a mother, as a wife, as a caretaker of elder parents, I
Mm.
have to continuously evaluate their circumstances and what are my priorities. Because for example, something that the organization may be offering for me today may work for me today, but tomorrow it may not, depending of my
That's
circumstances. So I
such a
love
good
there was
point.
an article a few years back written by Harvard Business Review, and they said, and I'm quoting them, work life balance is a cycle, not an achievement. So again,
Mm.
I go back to how do we as individuals continue to reprioritize or reassess
Yeah.
what our circumstances are so that we are able to have those powerful conversations with the organization. Hey, this is what I need right now at this point in my life.
Mm.
What do you have to, is there a benefit that I don't know about? Or to my manager, hey, this is what I'm going through right now. These are the circumstances. How can we have a conversation so that I can continue to be 100% engaged at work and 100% engaged in my personal life? It's not a quick answer, but it really goes back to there's ownership by both sides of the equation.
What would you say to someone who wants to initiate that conversation with their employer and kind of reassess what their benefits are, or reassess um, if there's an opportunity for new sponsorship, or what if there are new resources that they don't understand and haven't been shared? You know what I mean? Like, there's so many different ways that we can be
Yes, yes. So
supported.
I go back to 100%, and this is a great question to help people be ready for those conversations.
Mm.
I think sometimes, at least in my experience, sometimes employees come to us with, hey, these are some of the things they need without having had the opportunity to pause
Mm.
and really ask themselves some of these questions. So here's what I would recommend. First, understand what are the things that are causing you stress, and it could be the workload, but at the same time, what, or is it the culture, or is it the role itself, or is it the energy that you're putting at work and at home? So what can be prioritized or reprioritized, right? And what are the circumstances that are affecting you? So I think understanding those and really delayering those will allow for the employee and the employer to have a better conversation on what is needed, right? So understanding for me, I'll give you I'll give you an example. When you first have kids and you send them to daycare, man, they get sick every other day, right? Like literally, there's nothing you could do. And you're just like, I still have a full-time job. But there
Oh,
are benefits out there like Bright Horizons, who a lot of organizations use now that I wasn't aware of. And I'm here stressed out because I have nobody to take care of the kids. But I also didn't do a good job at asking what were all the benefits. And Bright Horizons, not a shot. I mean, this is not a paid advertisement, but just because I used them, they companies typically provide several days that you could take a year that are emergency services. So when
mm,
there's an emergency and your child is sick, these folks have come to your home and help take care of that child so that you can either work from home or do the things that you need to do at work, right? Which is very different than some of the other care services that are out there. I didn't know that. But I also
oh,
think that from an organization perspective, organizations could do a better job when they learn about different life events that people are having.
that's a
They could
good
have done a
one.
better job at saying, hey, we know you have a life event. Here are some services, some benefits that may or may not help you that you may be interested. So when I think of, hey, organization, you have a role, also, hey, employee, you have a role.
Yeah,
Now, that has changed as my children got older, and now I have elder parents. So now my situation is a little bit different, right? So that stresses me out. So I'm like, what are the things that I need to do? What are the things that I'm
yeah,
currently sacrificing that I don't want to sacrifice? Or what are the things that I need to just pause and do a mental check and understand what is within my control and what do
totally.
I need help with outside of what is within my control. So I think understanding that will really help when having those conversations, whether it's a manager,
Yeah.
right? Because there's some things that the manager has within their control, or is with with the human resources overall to say, hey, these are some things that I recommend
Yeah.
that would be helpful for somebody who's going through this situation, or maybe it may be something that they already have and they could offer. So I go back to let's do our homework internally so that we can then have powerful, actionable conversations that can move us to that next step
Yeah.
in creating a better place, or not even a better place to work, but a better place for us to be in, right? For me to be in as a human
I mean,
being,
it's just
mentally and emotionally and physically.
yeah, I mean, it's not just about a better workplace, but leading a better life
Yes.
overall. Whenever I talk to
Yes,
my
absolutely.
clients about wellness, it's so important to talk about career because your career impacts every area of your life. And I always encourage my clients who I work with when they're figuring out a new career direction or they're stuck in career clarity. I always tell them, you've got to think about yourself as one whole person. Look at your career from a holistic perspective, kind of like what you were just saying. At different stages of
Absolutely.
life, we need different types of support. At different stages of life, we need different types of benefits. And when you're thinking about having a conversation with an employer, something that's worked really well for me is saying, here is what I need so that I can show up to this space
Hmm.
better. And it really is like a
That's
positive
right.
feedback loop because it's like, okay, great. If I feel supported outside of work and my cup is filled outside of work, then I go into work more energized. I'm not feeling resentful. I'm more patient. Like there's so much that goes with it. And I want to touch on something. You said it's important to ask for what you need. And I thought of something, which is what if somebody doesn't know what they need? I actually had a manager a while ago ask me that, and I didn't know what to say. And you're right, it's on the employee to like really mindfully think through what is it that you need so that you can move forward. And it took some time, and I finally got to it, and I was like, hey, this is the resource that's missing. So I can fill up my cup and be better. So, how do you identify that, right? Like, what are some of those signs?
Yeah, I don't know if you would agree with it, but this is where I think that mentors come in
Mm,
because I mean, there are times where I think I need something, but what I really need is something else. And sometimes, actually, many times, talking to a coach or talking to some friends and even mentors is like, hey, this is where I'm going. Like, this is what I think I need. I don't even know what I need. This
Yeah.
is how I'm feeling right now. Let's just put it on the table. Like, I haven't had time to think about what I need. I just know that I'm stressed. I know that I'm not doing the things that I love. I know
Yeah.
that I am just running around 24 hours a day. So I don't even know what I need because I haven't had time. And sometimes it's talking to those mentors and
Yeah.
talking to friends or just even, hey, can we brainstorm together? Or really investing in yourself and getting a coach.
Yeah.
But I think not knowing what to do is the first step. It's an important step because it's
I
actually
agree.
realizing, you know what, I don't even have the energy to know to to do that homework.
That's
And
so
we talk about
honest.
this all the time. You don't have to do it alone. Especially this, when it comes to stress, mental health, all of these things, this is so important for you not to do it alone. This is actually the time where you want to reach out to other people around you and have these conversations because they can help you see something that you're probably not seeing because you're so stressed and in the moment and in the situation.
100%. And it's how do you recognize like those subtle signs? Sometimes when you're so deeply in it, you just aren't aware of it. Especially if you're experiencing burnout.
Hmm.
Typically it's because you're on this hamster wheel and you're like, okay, when do I have time to
Yes.
think? What's even happening? You're so in it that it's hard to see what's how that's impacting the things around you. So I don't know. I think when
Hmm.
you're considering like what are those subtle signs, I actually really agree with you. Talk to friends, like talk to a mentor, and even ask them like, "Hey, outside of work, when we get dinner, do you feel I show up in our conversations differently? Is my tone of voice different? Like, have I been sleeping in more than usual?" Like you can really like get that feedback.
Yes. And I would say normalize that to your point, because I
Yeah.
think sometimes we just, as women, we want to hold it and we want to, we put our cape on and we can do this. Yes, we could do this alone, but at what cost? And is it worth the cost?
No,
Right. So I would
never.
look at it that way. I think the other thing is listen to the signs
Mhm.
because sometimes we don't want to listen to our loved ones because it's just like, oh my God, they just want to tell us, right?
That's so true.
Or even to our friends, we're just like, oh my God, can you just leave me alone about that? I would say be open and listen to those signs and to those themes of what people are saying. Somebody at work may be like, oh, Merari, are you okay? You seem to be in a bad mood lately. And then maybe at home, somebody's like, okay, I'm not talking to you today. Or even your friends are like, not calling you that much anymore because you're not easy to talk to. I'm
Yeah.
just saying, like, look for those things as well
Yeah.
because you're like, this is a theme now. I mean, we're all good about figuring out themes at work. Hey, these are
Yeah.
the things that make me feel like that. Well, let's also pause and say, these are the themes I'm seeing. And this is how I'm feeling. Examine your emotions. Why am I so mad all the time? Or why am I so mad when the phone rings and so calls, right? Like, what is
Mm.
behind all of it? Because it may not be the person that's calling, it could be something under. And I think if we start paying attention to those themes, we may even say, Courtney, this is how I've been feeling. Can we just talk about this? Can we, this, help me out here? You may or may not know, but at least we're raising the flag. Like, I know something's wrong too. Let's talk through it. And I can't emphasize enough how important that for us to know our triggers and recognize the themes and really do that self-assessment helps us make better decisions even when speaking to your employer or to your manager and to the people around you. Because here's what I would say: what if your employer or your manager gives you what you need and that doesn't help? Right? Or not what
Mm.
you need, what you think you need. That's why I
Yes.
think it's so important that we continue to reevaluate.
You just gave so many great examples of like the subtle signs to really reflect on. The one that caught my ear was, why am I so mad when this person calls? And you think that it has to do with the person, and it has nothing to do with that person. It has to do with so
Speaking
many
from
other little
experience.
it has to do with so many other little triggers. So like what about when you're on the other side of that, right? You have the hard conversations, you gain the awareness, you are ready to take action. so that you can improve your wellness, then the discussion of boundaries comes up. The fun conversation of boundaries.
Mhm.
So, maintaining wellness when it comes to our overall lives, but especially how it impacts our career, I think a lot of people struggle with setting boundaries because they feel really guilty. But struggling to set those
Mhm.
boundaries, or if you don't set those boundaries, it actually makes everything worse. Like it negatively impacts your wellness. And all the work that you built up to that point to have the hard conversations, ask for help, it will kind of unravel if you don't set those boundaries. So I think it's important to talk about like, how do we set them to prevent burnout?
100%. And I would add even something more because I was talking to a friend and coaching her on this.
Mm,
And you said something that's really important. One, you said you're going to take action. If you say you're going to take action on those boundaries, you have to take action. Now, if you know that you are not as good at setting those boundaries and keeping to them, whether it's in the workplace or at home, depending where they are, ask for other people to support you. I'll give you an example. I was talking to somebody about it this week. They are a servant leader to too high of an extent, right? So
mhm,
she handles many projects in her current employer, and everybody loves her because she says yes to everything,
mm,
right? And her leader has told her, "Hey, I need you to set boundaries." Now, the issue comes when I asked her, "Hey, so what have you been doing?" She's like, "Well, when I said no to Courtney, they went to my boss and my boss is like, "Oh, Courtney, but can't you do them a favor?" Right?
mm,
So this is where I said, now my counsel to her is like, now you need to have a conversation with your leader and say, "Okay, you've asked me to put these boundaries in place so that I can make sure that number one, I have a work life balance or whatever we want to call it nowadays. And I'm able to perform at a higher level with this other task you ask. But when I say no, you're undermining my my response and the authority that you've given me." So those are conversations that we also need to have with our leaders to say, this is where, and then what I coached her is, you need to go and talk to your leader and say, this is where I need your help so
yeah.
that I can do A, B, and C better for the
Mm,
organization. And go from that perspective and help hold each other accountable, because there's one thing when you set your boundaries and you break them yourself, but there's another thing when you ask somebody to help you and they're breaking them too and not helping you. So I
so
think
hard.
and it's real. It's happened. Like, it's happened this week with somebody in another
Mm,
organization that I was coaching. So I'm thinking, how do you hold yourself accountable, right?
yeah.
And how do you help your leader help you hold yourself accountable? And in some cases, how do you coach your leader? And you do, to say, "Hey, this is how you can help me make sure that the boundaries that I set forward that are going to help support the objectives of the organization is going to have a better ROI for all of us in return," right? So I think
Yeah.
it's important, and I don't know if you will coach them differently, but that was kind of my advice or my mentorship, because it was more a mentor, not a coaching.
I love how in the weeds you're getting with all of this. Like full circle, you're touching on how the conversation of wellness can come up in so many different ways in the workplace. Whether
Absolutely.
it's the phone call outside of work, if it's having that discussion with the manager, if it's having a discussion with a mentor, having the discussion with ourselves, which can be the hardest conversation. Let's be real. It has to start with us, and actually setting those boundaries. So something I coach people on is how to say no, and how to say no so that they can prevent burnout from happening. So here's one example. Specifically how to say no professionally. That one's really challenging for people. Here's what you could do. You can say something like, "I'd love to help, but my current workload will not allow me to give this attention right now, or this current workload won't allow me to give the attention this task deserves. And I think if you frame it in a way that's, hey, I want to be able to do this really well, but right now I can't. And it's coming from a place of I care about myself and I care about this task, this project, whatever. I care that it's executed well. I think that's generally very well received because it's not a flat out, nope, I just don't want to. It's a no with a purpose. And the clients I've worked with have tried that out with their
And I
managers and loved it.
yeah, and I think it's also inviting them, say, "Hey, can you help me reprioritize what I currently have on my plate?" Because now you're
Mhm.
inviting them to be part of the solution so that you could
Yes.
close the gap and really help answer that for them. I love that. And I agree. I've been saying it, right? It has to start with us, but I would say it has to start with us as leaders too, because there's many multicultural women who are leaders. And what I would say to them is, as leaders, we need to also understand well, number one, be empathetic, but then number two, understand the resources that the organization has, right? So let's not just, it's great. I'm HR. Absolutely. If you don't know, send them to HR, right? Because we want to help our employees. But as a leader, you don't need to know all the details, but you need to know, hey, these are some of the resources that you have. But as a leader, I will also educate myself. And I do this maybe if outside of work, or I read articles or things like that. How can I, as a leader, help my team when it comes to
Yeah.
providing resources that are to make sure that there's mental wellness, and how do I engage them differently? So I would say we need to educate ourselves as leaders. How do we help
Yeah.
our teams? Because I can't say that enough. Being a leader is not just about driving objectives and driving results. It's also about how do we help our people grow? How do we
Yeah.
mentor them? How do we support them so that they can have a more productive and effective time at work? So that when they're at home, they could worry about the things that are at home. So there's a few things that I believe, and I'm going to leave this on there. We could put it in the show notes, but there was a 2024 State of Workforce Mental Health Report
Mm.
that talked about some of the things that organizations can do. And there were six of them that they mentioned. One is organizations should make sure that their mental health strategies embrace a full spectrum of needs. And what do I mean by that? I mean, anything is possible. You and I just talked about several different ones on how they show up at work. So they need to do that homework and understand that. I would make sure that they expand this support to life events. So depending on the life event, if the company is aware of it, make sure that the employees know those resources are available. Not just put it on the website and expect for people to read it. That's not the reality, right?
No.
Um, as leaders,
Like you
we got
said,
to build
people
trust
people
with
struggle to
our.
do the homework. Sorry, I just wanted to
Go
make
ahead.
the plug there. You said earlier it's really hard
Yes,
for people to do the
100%.
homework. They don't have the mental capacity. If they're already burnt out, if you just put it on a website, they're probably not going to read it. So yeah, keep going
You
on
don't
that
know what you
point.
don't know. And as
Yeah.
organizations, we have so much reporting analysis now that we know when somebody has a life event. Most companies would know when somebody has a life event and they can provide something. But I would say, as a leader, whether you're a multicultural woman, as a leader, or one asking for the support, build trust. Build that trust with your leader and with your direct reports.
Mhm.
Because, and you talk about this a lot, Courtney, having just a safe space to talk about some of the things that are vulnerable in the personal life, or that they may be struggling with family, or whatever it may be, a life event themselves. That psychological safe space is so critical in building that trust. There are so many other things, and you all can look at it in the show notes. But what I can't emphasize enough of building that safe space and that trust, because then we could come up with a solution together
Mhm.
versus I need this and you can't provide it. It's more, how can we help you? Right? There may be things that they can't because it's my personal, but there may be some resources that they could refer me to.
So we're thinking about holistic wellness, honestly. Your career is a part of it, how you have those conversations is a part of it. And sometimes people think it's my job's fault, right? If you think about anything in life, if you're dating or if you're married, the person you spend the most time with, or wherever you spend the most time doing anything, it's
Yes.
so easy to blame that person, that environment, wherever you are most on whatever circumstances you have in your life. And sometimes, I mean, if you really pause and think about it, you can say, oh, I feel this way because of my job. But what if it has to do with the balance outside of work? How are you filling up your cup
Yes.
outside of work? How do you spend your time outside of work? And so taking it off of just from the organization side, what are you doing after work? How do you spend your mornings? What do you do on the weekends? Like those things really matter. Um, and what I've learned in my personal life, also with the clients I work with, it makes such a big difference. What you do outside of work can make your day job so much more bearable. And the people who once said, I'm quitting my job, that's the
I,
solution, just change what they did outside of work. And then everything transformed.
it's I'm sure there's probably other resources out there right now, but I read this book like 20 years ago and it's called The Corporate Athlete. And
Mm,
it's all about how you manage your energy, not your
love
time.
that.
And it goes to your point on what are all those, wherever your energy goes, all the emotions and all that is going to flow to it, right?
Hmm.
And there's, I think I may have talked about it before, but there's different energies, right? It's your mental, physical, spiritual energy. It's your there was another one and now I'm forgetting, but it's how you manage your energy that it's really going to help determine how you deal with stress. How do you deal um with the ongoing demands of both work and your personal life? But it
Yeah.
is absolutely right. If you're getting out of work and you're doing things that are going to unintentionally cause more stress, right? Even the people that you're hanging out with, we talked about this.
Yeah.
Oh, mentally and emotionally, those are the other ones. People that you're hanging out with that are negative. It only
Yeah.
takes one person you could be the most happy person. It only takes one person to really completely shift your energy to become negative. So if that is the people you're surrounding yourself with, it's going to impact the way you feel. And guess what? It's going to impact your mental health, your stress, and everything else around you.
Everything
So
else.
something as simple as the people that you're around, something also as simple as the way that you speak to yourself can cause and increase the amount of stress that you're currently carrying. So, how you spend your energy will be critical
Yeah.
to really living a more fulfilled life at work and in your personal space.
Work life balance doesn't fully exist because at different seasons of
Yes.
life, there
Yep.
are different demands, right? And so I think the balance isn't necessarily about, oh, everything is just maintained at the same level. It's, hey, in Q1, my priority is this fitness goal outside of work. In Q2, it's a new hobby. It's in like, right, like things can just fluctuate and change over time. And that's a part of energy management.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. It's less about
Absolutely.
the balance, the word balance, I think that the word balance can feel very unattainable to people, but it's the energy management.
Yep.
That's where the truth lies.
It's how you manage your energy. And I think you only have 24 hours in a day. How you manage that energy is critical because managing
Whew.
energy is also how you spend in your downtime.
Yeah. So I actually do a lot of energy management, And something I thought about as an example, I noticed a dramatic difference if I worked out before work versus after work. If I work out before work, I would say I am a morning person, but I've also trained myself to be a morning person because, from an energy management perspective, I was so much more energized at work if I exercised before. And the tasks that would typically, frankly, piss me off in the morning did not make me as upset. They didn't make me as upset because I was
Yes.
just more patient. I felt more balanced, and then I got more done. So it's also thinking about like, what are those pockets of the day that boost your energy? Something that's
Yes.
so simple that honestly everybody listening can think about. When do you take your lunch break? Like that. I remember I was
Mm,
working a job that this was years ago that just really wasn't for me. I felt like a tiger in a cage. My energy constantly felt depleted, and it wasn't anything to do with, my boss or my team. I loved them. Um, it was more so because that job wasn't right for me. It didn't allow me to exercise my uniqueness and my strengths and the things that are really good for me. So, what I noticed when I was working that specific job is I became increasingly irritable. And it had nothing to do with anyone else other than the fact that it wasn't for me. And so I was like, okay, I'm not quitting
yes.
right now. How do I manage the situation I'm in? And I started playing around with when I take my lunch breaks. For me, it was let me exercise before work. While I have that energy, it carries me through the day a little bit longer. I'll take a later lunch break because then pushing through the end of the day feels a lot more tolerable. It's the smallest things. It's the
I
smallest
love that.
things that are dominoes.
What I would remind people is energy comes from the four main sources in humans. It's the
Mm,
body, the emotions, the mind, and the spirit. And what I
yeah.
would challenge every listener is to change one thing, to do one thing differently out of those four energy sources
Yeah.
that as humans we produce energy from, and start with one thing and seeing how that changes and how that makes you feel. And that's exactly what you said, right? You started playing around with your workout time. Change one thing, and then you started working around, playing around with, oh, my lunch time, because
Hmm.
there are some situations that we're just not going to be able to get out,
Yeah.
whether it's work, whether it's family members.
Yeah.
They're family members, right? You can't just some of them you just can't. They're there forever. So how are you managing your energy
Yeah.
around that and
Well,
preparing yourself for those situations, because it will help you emotionally. And you and I both heard, and I'm sure everybody's heard about it, that your emotional intelligence is huge, because it is how everything else around it, how you react to everything around you. So being able to manage that and really just change one thing on where the energy sources come from for human beings, test
yeah.
it out, try it. And see how it goes. And
Yeah.
definitely let us know, tag us, and tell us how you seen your life changing depending on where you're spending your energy.
100%. An emphasis on the try one at a time. It can feel like such a
Yes,
burden
yes.
and it can feel so heavy to make these kind of changes. Starting with one makes this whole process so much more manageable. So much more manageable. And then you'll start to notice how everything falls together. It becomes very seamless. Let's start with one, just one. I'm excited to hear what people
Just
try.
one.
We'll keep learning from each other, right? There are certain seasons where I'm like, you know what? You just gave me the idea. I forgot that 3 years ago I was playing around with my exercise times. Maybe I should do that again. Okay. I'm excited. I'm excited to hear what people say.
And the last thing that I would say is managing your energy. Yes, it comes from those four sources, but it's different for all of us. So
Yeah.
what may work for Courtney, what may work for me, may not work for you. So I would say, I know you're saying, okay, one more thing. I just told you I'm listening to this because I'm stressed and I can't handle it. And you're giving me one more thing to do. But what I would say is spend the time figuring out what works for you because it is different for all of us depending on that chapter in your life you're going through. And give yourself the permission to change your mind or change it, or
Oh, yeah.
you don't have to live with this. It is, it could change today and it could probably change next week. And that's okay. But give yourself permission to reassess, to really understand what you need, because this is all about you. This is all about your mental health, your ability to live a life of freedom and feel that you can work and do your personal things and just be great at everything that you do. The reality is, we may not be great at some things, and that's okay, but give yourself the permission, because something as simple as saying, you know what? I'm okay with not being great at having my house clean every day, but I know I'm going to be great at being present for my children, right? Whatever it may be, you could change those every day, by the way. Today, I may be like, my house is going to look the best. And you know what? My children are just going to have to figure out something else. I don't know. I'm being funny about it, but the reality is you could change those every day. Give yourself the permission. This is about how you spend your energy so that you can show up the best to yourself and to those around you.
Want more advice on how to break the rules and outsmart the game to advance your career? Check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and our website, whatrulespodcast.com, for more insight from our guests and host, and join our community on LinkedIn, where we discuss rule-breaking strategies for multicultural women. What Rules is a project of Zara Consulting and is supported by the amazing team at Stories Bureau. This episode was produced by Alexandra Uresta, with editing and music supervision by Joshua Ramsey, and was engineered and mixed by Tim Ballant. Our podcast cover was designed by DeLeon Creative. Visit whatrulespodcast.com for more info, upcoming events, and all episodes of What Rules, including video, and make sure to give us a follow.